So I think planning is critical to any sort of modern disability support system, but there are lots of different purposes for planning, and so I think there need to be quite a few different pathways for people. So I think the concept of there being different ways of doing it and people having some choice about that. If you start to unpack planning, it's actually got a lot of assumptions about who's around the table, what it's centred on, whether it's centred on the person or the service system, who's around the person, and also the person's identity during the planning process, whether it's a positive identity or whether it's an identity defined by their disability. So when you start to unpack how planning occurs, there are lots of things that are at play. So I just want to give a couple of examples of different ways in which I've been involved with planning. First one has been as part of our work with Locally Recorded Nation, the concept of developing an ongoing personal relationship with people, and in the context of that, as that relationship grows, then there's building of networks, there's information, there's support, and people start to clarify their goals and their dreams and their vision, and they start to put in place practical steps to try and make that happen. So I think there is great value in planning in the context of a developmental relationship over a period of time. Second example would be, I did a very interesting piece of work around a community living plan for Western Australia, because we found that a lot of people are getting stuck in this group home mentality. So if you had a significant disability, people are thinking, well, there's only really one way. And so helping people imagine people having their own home in the community and a good life of their choosing as an alternative to living in a group home situation. So we sort of unpacked all that, and we developed a bunch of building blocks for that, and also 5 or 6 different ways in which people could think about organising their support. And it was very, very interesting, because in that process I saw very, very clearly that when we started to build the building blocks around this, that before you did the planning bit, if you did the intentional network development, you had more people around you to think about a bigger idea and more people to take forward the various pieces of... So we sort of developed this building blocks centred on the person's vision, but the first step was building a network of, and then we started getting into information planning, all those sorts of things. So the key thing there is about where planning sits in the pathway and how it's enriched by some intentional work to get more people around the person as part of that process. And I think the last example is in the context of the National Disability Insurance Scheme is there are people's life plans, and then of course there's a point at which people's life plans and the concept of government funding or support of some kind interact. And so the basic frame for planning in the insurance scheme is people's goals and aspirations, then the important contributions of family, friends, community and mainstream, and then the concept of reasonable necessary support, and then the individual funds to support that. And I think if we do that in the right balance, in the right way, people can do their broad planning, they can come, they can meet with the agency, and the concept of the funding then sort of really adding to the more natural things in community. So I think there are 3 examples, and the point there is no one way, but I think each of those are good examples of sort of key design features that I think will be part of a modern system. So if I sort of went back, I think the concept of really planning is built around vision and values. So that's really the starting point, and so if that's the starting point. It's also built around people having a positive identity and about the importance of family, friends, relationships, and a broad view of citizenship and contribution. Then there is various methodologies you can use, and I think the key bit there is that having service providers can support people with this process, but it's important that it is not dominated by a perspective of service in people's lives. So there are various choices that people would have who might support them in that planning. It might be people with lived experience, it might be independent planners, it might be a trusted professional person. So the most important thing there is that it's values driven, the right people around the table, it's got a positive sense of the person and a possibility, and then you've got the technical bits then of sort of facilitating that process. And of course there are various ways now of recording that, and I think graphic recording, very, very powerful. I did my path many, many years ago as part of my training. It still sits in, it's in my wine cellar at home up on the top there. I pull it out, and so it is a very, very powerful experience. And on that sort of point, I think that if people are going to support people with this very personal planning, then it's important that they themselves have got the skills and the sensitivity to do that in a sort of respectful way.